I stepped inside to find my family on the couch. My husband, mom, son, and my sister. What's wrong? I then asked, fearing the very worst. Mom, just sit, my son told me. You must grasp a new truth. You're not in charge of our family any longer. Aunt Brenda, she makes Dad so much happier now. I was absolutely livid. They had all known. I left the room without a word. The very next morning I had 118 missed calls. You know that feeling when you've just poured everything into fixing someone else's colossal mistake, hoping for a sliver of gratitude, only to walk into your own home and find the people you love most ready to tear your entire world apart? That night, I was exhausted, aching, and just wanted my bed, but what I walked into was a betrayal so profound, it felt like a family firing squad, with my own son pointing the gun. It was a brutal Chicago night, the kind of cold that sinks deep into your bones. I'd just landed at O'Hare, my eyes burning from 3 grueling days in New York, where I'd single-handedly salvaged a huge deal for our real estate empire, a deal my husband, Mark, had nearly torpedoed with his arrogance. All I craved was a hot shower, a glass of red wine, and the comfort of my home. I couldn't wait to tell Mark I'd fixed his mess, that the H&M empire we'd built together for 22 years was safe for another quarter. But pulling into our driveway, I saw the living room lights blazing bright, unnaturally so, against the snowy dark. That was strange. Usually by 10 p.m., the house was quiet. Mark would be in his study, our 21-year-old son, Tyler, probably gaming or out. I unlocked the front door, dropping my keys into the bowl. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, charged, like the air before a thunderstorm. Hello. I called out, hanging up my coat. Mark? Tyler. In here, Heather? My mother's voice floated from the living room. My stomach clenched. My mom, Joyce, lived 40 minutes away. What was she doing here on a Tuesday night? A sudden, cold panic gripped me. Had something happened to my sister Brenda? Was someone sick? I rushed into the living room, my heart hammering against my ribs. But it wasn't a medical emergency. It was a tribunal. They were all there, arranged on the custom leather sectional I'd picked out last Christmas. Mark was in the center, impeccably dressed, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. To his left, my mother, Joyce, rigid posture, hands clasped tight. To his right, Brenda, my younger sister. And on the adjacent armchair, my son, Tyler. The atmosphere was suffocating. No one was crying. No one looked sad. They looked resolved. What's going on? I asked, my breath catching. Is everyone okay, Mom? I took a step forward, but Tyler stood up. He didn't come to hug me. He stood like a security guard, blocking a doorway. He looked at me with eyes that were utterly devoid of the warmth I had nurtured for 2 decades. Mom, sit down, Tyler said. His voice was cold, deeper than I remembered, stripped of any affection. You need to listen. And you need to not freak out. Freak out? Tyler, you're scaring me. What is this? You need to accept a new reality, he continued, reciting words that sounded rehearsed. You're not in charge of this family anymore. I looked at Mark, pleading. Mark, why aren't you saying anything? He finally looked up. His handsome face, the public image of our company for years, twisted into a look of pity mixed with sheer annoyance. It's over, Heather. The charade. It's done. Charade? I felt like I was drowning on dry land. Aunt Brenda, Tyler said, gesturing to my sister. She makes Dad happier now. Unlike you, she understands him. The world stopped spinning. I looked at Brenda, my little sister. The one whose rent I'd paid for 6 years. The one I'd hired when no one else would give her a job. She was sitting with her legs crossed, wearing a silk blouse that looked suspiciously like one missing from my closet. And then I saw it. Mark's hand, resting casually, possessively, on Brenda's knee. We didn't want you to find out from a stranger, my mother, Joyce, chimed in. Her voice wasn't apologetic, it was lecturing. We wanted to do this as a family. Heather, you have to be realistic. You've been married to your work for years. Mark is a man with needs. He needs a wife who is present, not a business partner who sleeps with her laptop. Mom, I whispered, the betrayal slicing deeper than any knife. You knew? You're condoning this. I'm supporting happiness, Joyce said, lifting her chin defiantly. Brenda and Mark, they share a connection. They love each other, Heather. It's not something they planned. It just happened. You can't punish them for falling in love. I looked at Brenda. She offered a small, triumphant smile, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and looked down. On her finger, flashing under the recessed lighting, was a diamond ring. It wasn't a new ring. It was my ring. The vintage Art Deco diamond Mark had given me for our 20th anniversary. The one that had mysteriously vanished from my jewelry box 6 months ago. I had torn the house apart looking for it, crying for days. Mark had told me I was careless, that I probably lost it at the gym. That's my ring, I said, my voice trembling with a rage so pure, it felt hot in my throat. It fits her better, Mark said, shrugging. It was wasted on you. You never wear jewelry anyway. We want you to move out, Tyler said, breaking the silence again. Dad is keeping the house. I'm staying here. It's better if you go. You create too much tension. My son, my baby boy, who I had nursed through fevers, whose college tuition I paid for by working 80-hour weeks. He was kicking me out of the home I built. You're choosing this? I asked Tyler, tears finally stinging my eyes. You're choosing the woman who is sleeping with your father behind my back? That's your aunt, Tyler. She's not just my aunt anymore, Tyler sneered. She's the only one who actually listens to me. You just throw money at me and tell me to study. Dad and Brenda, they treat me like an adult. I looked at the four of them. My husband, my sister, my mother, my son, the four pillars of my life. And every single one of them was rotten. They weren't just breaking my heart, they were dismantling my existence with a casual cruelty that took my breath away. I felt a wave of nausea, but I swallowed it down. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me collapse. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't beg. I straightened my spine. I looked at Mark, locking eyes with him until he flinched and looked away. You think you've won? I said, my voice quiet but deadly steady. You think you can just rewrite history because you're bored and selfish? Don't make a scene, Heather, Brenda said, her voice sickly sweet. Let's be mature about this divorce. Divorce. I let out a short, dry laugh. Oh, you have no idea what's coming. Don't threaten me, Mark snapped, his arrogance returning. I've already spoken to legal. You're out. The prenup, the company bylaws. I have it all covered. Walk out that door, Heather. If you stay, I'll have security remove you from my property. Your property? I looked around the room. I picked every tile in this house. I paid for every brick. And now you're trespassing, Tyler said. That was it. The final severing. I looked at my son one last time, memorizing the face of the stranger he had become. Okay, I said. I turned around. I didn't take my coat off. I didn't pick up my keys from the bowl. I had my spare set in my pocket. I walked to the door. Where are you going? Joyce called out, sudden anxiety spiking her voice. Heather, we need to discuss the settlement. Mark has a generous offer if you sign tonight. I didn't answer. I opened the heavy oak door and stepped out into the freezing Chicago night. The wind hit my face, drying the tears before they could fall. I got into my car, the engine roaring to life in the silence of the driveway. As I backed out, I saw them through the living room window. They were already pouring champagne. They were celebrating my erasure. I drove into the darkness, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing for certain. The Heather they knew, the doormat, the provider, the fixer, had died in that living room. And the woman driving away was someone they should be very, very afraid of. Transition to a slightly different shot, maybe a bit darker, more reflective. If you are listening to this and you are as furious as I was in that moment, please hit the like button. And comment 1 below. Let me know you're with me. Your support tells me I'm not alone in this fight. Comment 1 now, because trust me, what they did next makes this betrayal look like a warm-up act. I drove for an hour, the city lights blurring into streaks of red and gold through my windshield. My mind was a chaotic storm. Brenda's smirk, the ring on her finger, Tyler's cold stare. But underneath the shock, a primal instinct was kicking in, survival. I needed gas. The fuel light had been blinking since I left the airport, but I'd been too anxious to get home to stop. Now, on a desolate stretch of highway, I pulled into a 24-hour gas station. My hands were shaking as I stepped out into the biting cold. I slid my credit card, the platinum card linked to our joint account, the one I used for everything from grocery runs to business dinners, into the pump. Processing. The screen blinked red, declined. See cashier. I frowned. That was impossible. The credit limit was $50,000, and I'd paid the bill in full 3 days ago. I tried again. Declined. A cold pit formed in my stomach, heavier than the betrayal I'd just witnessed. I reached into my wallet and pulled out my personal debit card, linked to my salary account. I walked inside. The attendant, a bored teenager with headphones, didn't even look up as I placed a bottle of water and a pack of gum on the counter. I swiped the debit card. It didn't go through, he mumbled, popping his gum. Try it again, I said, my voice tight. There's money in there. He sighed, ran it again. Declined, lady. Insufficient funds or card locked. You got cash. I stood there, paralyzed, under the harsh fluorescent lights. My banking app. I needed to check my app. My fingers fumbled with my phone. I logged in. Access denied. User authentication failed. Please contact your branch. I tried the business account. Access denied. The joint savings. Access denied. Mark hadn't just kicked me out of the house. He had executed a financial kill switch. He had been planning this. You don't lock out a co-owner from business and personal accounts instantly unless you've laid the groundwork with the bank, falsely claiming fraud or changing administrative privileges days in advance. He wanted me destitute. He wanted me stranded in the middle of the night with no resources, so I would crawl back and sign whatever generous offer Joyce had mentioned. I dug through my purse, past the useless plastic, to the small zipper pocket at the bottom. I found 3 crumbled $20 bills and a handful of quarters. $60. That was my net worth right now. I paid for 5 gallons of gas and the water with cash. I got back in my car, shivering, not just from the cold, but from the terrifying realization of my vulnerability. I couldn't go to a hotel. I didn't have a credit card for the deposit. I couldn't go to my mother's house. I couldn't go to Brenda's. I drove until I found a motel with a flickering neon sign that read vacancy. It was one of those places where truckers slept for a few hours. The kind of place where the sheets smell like stale smoke and regret. Cash up front, the night manager said through bulletproof glass. $50 for the night. I handed over $50 of my remaining $60. He slid a key across the tray. Room 12. The room was freezing. The heater rattled and coughed out air that smelled like burnt dust. I sat on the edge of the sagging mattress, still in my expensive business suit, my coat wrapped around me. I looked at my phone. The screen was lit up with notifications. Not apologies. Not please come back. 118 missed calls. They were mostly from Mark's personal attorney, a shark named Robert Vance. And then the emails started pinging. Subject: dissolution of marriage settlement agreement. Subject: urgent NDA required. Subject: notice of termination. H&M Real Estate. I opened the termination notice first. It was a PDF attached to an email from the HR director, a woman I had hired, a woman I had mentored. Dear Miss Heather Bryant, effective immediately, your position as Chief Operating Officer is terminated for cause. Allegations of corporate espionage and gross negligence. I laughed. A harsh, ragged sound in the empty room. Espionage? Negligence? I was the one who stayed up until 3 a.m. auditing the books. I was the one who knew every zoning law in Chicago. Mark couldn't even convert a PDF without asking me for help. And then a text message came through. It was from Tyler. My thumb hovered over the screen, a tiny foolish part of me hoping he had snuck away, that he was sorry. Tyler, Mom, don't make this hard. Dad says he'll cut off my tuition and trust fund if you fight the divorce. He promised me the VP spot next year if I stick with him. You always told me to be ambitious. I'm just doing what you taught me. Please understand. I dropped the phone onto the bed like it was burning hot. That was the final erasure. Mark hadn't just taken my money and my job. He had bought my son's soul. He had used the wealth I helped build to bribe my own child against me. I curled up on top of the dirty bedspread, knees to my chest. The tears finally came, hot and fast. I cried for the boy I used to read bedtime stories to. I cried for the sister I had protected on the playground. I cried for the husband I had believed in when he was nothing but a smile and a cheap suit. But as the night wore on, and the tears dried into crusty salt on my cheeks, something else began to settle in my chest. It was cold and heavy, like a stone. They thought they had erased me. They thought that by taking the credit cards and the passwords, they had taken my power. They forgot one thing. They forgot who built the castle they were sitting in. They forgot who designed the security systems, who wrote the contracts, and who knew where the bodies were buried. Mark thought H&M Real Estate ran on his charm. He was about to learn that it ran on my brain. And while he might have stolen the keys to the front door, he had forgotten that the architect always leaves a back door. I stared at the water stain on the ceiling, waiting for the sun to rise. I wasn't Heather the wife anymore. I wasn't Heather the mother. I was Heather the architect. And I was about to bring the whole house down. Voice slightly changes, more determined, less emotional. Sleep was impossible in that motel room. The traffic noise from the interstate was a constant drone, but it was the noise in my head that kept me awake. Memories, sharp and jagged, played on a loop. To understand why I was lying on a dirty mattress with $10 in my pocket, I had to go back. I had to look at the foundation of my life and realize it had been cracked from the very beginning. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, the older of 2 daughters. My father died when I was 7, leaving my mother, Joyce, to raise us alone. His death broke something in her. Or maybe it just revealed who she really was. She was a woman who needed to be adored, needed to be the center of attention, and she projected that need onto her children, or rather, onto one child. Brenda was born beautiful. Even as a baby, she had ringlets of gold hair and big blue saucer eyes that made strangers stop in the street. I was plain, brown hair, serious eyes, sturdy. I was the responsible one. Brenda was the princess. I remember the day I turned 18. I had just received my acceptance letter to the University of Chicago with a partial scholarship. It was my ticket out. I had worked 3 part-time jobs throughout high school, tutoring, waitressing, shelving books at the library, to save for the rest of the tuition. I ran into the kitchen, waving the letter. Mom, I got in. Joyce was at the table painting Brenda's nails. Brenda was 12 then, already demanding and petulant. That's nice, Heather, Mom said without looking up. But keep your voice down. Brenda has a headache. But Mom, it's Chicago. It's the business program. Joyce sighed, finally looking at me. Her eyes weren't filled with pride. They were calculating. Heather, honey, we need to talk about that money you saved, your college fund. Well, Brenda has been scouted. There's a modeling convention in Orlando next month. It could be her big break, but the fees, the travel, the portfolio photos, it's expensive. My stomach dropped. Mom, that's my tuition money. I earned it. You're so selfish, Heather, Brenda chimed in, blowing on her wet nails. Don't you want me to be famous? When I'm rich, I'll buy you a car. Heather, Mom said, her voice taking on that tone, the one that mixed guilt with command. You are the strong one. You're smart. You can always find a way. You can work another year, take night classes. But Brenda, she's delicate. This is her dream. You wouldn't want to crush your sister's dream, would you? Families sacrifice for each other. I gave them the money. Of course I did. I had been conditioned for 18 years to believe that my value lay only in what I could provide for them. I was the scapegoat, the mule, the fixer. Brenda was the golden child, the star, the one who deserved to shine. Brenda went to Orlando. She didn't get signed. She spent the money on clothes and theme parks. I spent the next year working double shifts at a diner to earn the money back. I started college a year late, exhausted, but determined. That dynamic never changed. It just evolved. When I graduated at the top of my class, Mom didn't come to the ceremony because Brenda had severe anxiety over a breakup with a boyfriend of 2 weeks. I walked across the stage alone. When I got my first big promotion at a finance firm, Mom said, "That's great, honey. Hey, can you loan Brenda $2,000? Her landlord is being unreasonable." I paid Brenda's rent. I paid for her car repairs. I paid for her acting classes that she never attended. I bought Mom a condo so she wouldn't have to worry about stairs. I thought I was buying their love. I thought if I just gave enough, worked hard enough, fixed enough problems, they would finally look at me the way they looked at Brenda. I thought that one day Mom would cut my face and say, "I'm so proud of you, Heather. You are my joy." But I was never their joy. I was their utility bill. I was their safety net. And then I met Mark. He was charming, ambitious, and seemed to see me. He told me I was brilliant. He told me I was beautiful. I didn't realize then that he had the same calculating look in his eyes that my mother had. He didn't see a soulmate. He saw a host. He saw a woman who was trained to give everything and ask for nothing in return. He fit perfectly into the empty space in my heart that my mother and sister had gouged out. I married him thinking I was building a new family, a better family. Lying in the dark motel room, the realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I hadn't escaped my family dynamic by marrying Mark. I had recreated it. Mark was the golden child, demanding adoration and resources. I was still the scapegoat, working in the shadows to keep the lights on. And Brenda? Brenda was just the inevitable conclusion. The two parasites in my life had finally found each other. You're the strong one, Heather. My mother's voice echoed in my memory. Well, she was right about one thing. I was strong. Strong enough to carry them for 40 years. And now, God help them, I was strong enough to drop them. I sat up in bed, the metal springs squeaking. I wasn't going to cry anymore. The sadness was gone, replaced by a cold, clinical clarity. They wanted the delicate Brenda. They wanted the dreamer Mark. Fine, they could have each other, but they couldn't have my money. They couldn't have my company. I reached for my laptop bag. It was time to stop being the daughter who sacrificed. It was time to be the CEO who liquidated bad assets. Voice now cold, analytical, with simmering rage underneath. The morning sun filtered through the dirty curtains, casting long, dusty shadows. I opened my laptop. Thankfully, I had a portable Wi-Fi hotspot in my bag, a habit from years of travel. Mark couldn't cut off a device he didn't know existed. I didn't log into the bank accounts yet. I knew those doors were bolted shut. Instead, I opened a file named HNM_archive_01. To understand how I was going to destroy Mark, you have to understand how I built him. I met Mark 22 years ago at a real estate networking mixer in downtown Chicago. He was 29, wearing a suit that didn't quite fit, holding a glass of cheap wine, and holding court with a group of investors. He was electric. He had a smile that could sell ice to an Eskimo, a laugh that made you feel like you were the funniest person in the room. I was 25, a junior analyst at a top firm, standing in the corner clutching my binder of market research. I watched him work the room. He was charismatic, yes, but I could hear what he was saying. He was spouting buzzwords, making promises about returns that were mathematically impossible. He cornered me by the buffet. "You look like you're analyzing the structural integrity of the shrimp cocktail," he joked. I didn't smile. "I'm analyzing your pitch to those investors. You're promising a 15% cap rate on a property in a declining district. You're going to lose their money." He blinked, surprised. Then he laughed. "Okay, you caught me. I'm an idea man, not a numbers guy. I need someone who understands the boring stuff. The boring stuff is what keeps you out of prison, I said dryly. He fell in love with me, or at least with what I could do for him right then and there. Within 6 months, we were married. Within a year, we started H&M Real Estate. The division of labor was established immediately. Mark was the face. He was the CEO. He took the client meetings, played golf with the developers, and gave interviews to the business journals. He loved the spotlight. He loved the title. I was the architect. I was the CEO. But really, I was everything else. I found the properties. I negotiated the loans. I managed the contractors. I fought with the city council over zoning permits. I did the taxes, the payroll, the legal compliance. Our first major project was a disaster waiting to happen. Mark had bought a dilapidated warehouse in the meatpacking district, convinced it would be the next hot loft conversion. He overpaid by $500,000. The contractor he hired ran off with the deposit. We were facing bankruptcy before we had even sold a single unit. I remember sitting at our kitchen table, pregnant with Tyler, looking at the red ink on the ledger. Mark was pacing, panicking, sweating through his shirt. "We're done, Heather," he cried. "My reputation is ruined. They're going to sue me." "Sit down," I ordered. I took my grandmother's jewelry, the only inheritance I had ever received, kept safe from my mother and Brenda, and sold it. I liquidated my 401k. I renegotiated the terms with the bank, presenting a business plan so detailed, so bulletproof, that the loan officer said it was the best he'd ever seen. I fired Mark's buddy, who was acting as the project manager, and took over the site supervision myself, waddling through construction zones in a hard hat with a 6-month belly. We finished the project. We sold out in 3 weeks. Mark was hailed as a visionary in Crane's Chicago business. The headline read, "Mark Bryant, the new king of lofts." He brought the magazine home, beaming. "Look at this, honey. We did it." He didn't mention me in the interview. Not once. When I pointed it out gently, he kissed my forehead. "Babe, you know how the media is. They like a singular narrative. Besides, you hate the spotlight. You're my secret weapon, the power behind the throne." I accepted it. I told myself it was for the family. I told myself that as long as the company succeeded, it didn't matter whose face was on the cover. I was a fool. For 20 years, I built the stage, set the lights, and wrote the script. Mark just walked out and took the bow. And the company grew. We expanded into commercial real estate, luxury condos, mixed-use developments. We were worth millions. But the structure of the company, that was my masterpiece. Mark was lazy with details. He hated reading contracts. He hated passwords. "Just fix it, Heather," was his catchphrase. So, I set up the digital infrastructure. I created the intricate web of LLCs to limit liability. I set up the automated banking transfers. And because Mark was paranoid about employees stealing from him, he insisted on a localized, highly encrypted internal server for our most sensitive financial data. He wanted a ghost key, he had said. A master administrative access that could bypass all other protocols in case we ever got locked out or held hostage by IT. Only you and I will know the ghost key. But Mark never bothered to memorize the complex 64-character string I generated. He wrote it on a sticky note, put it in his desk drawer for a week, and then threw it away, assuming I would always be there to type it in for him. He was right. I was always there until yesterday. Now, sitting in the motel, I looked at the login screen for the H&M private server. The VPN tunnel was secure. Mark thought that by calling the bank and removing me as a signatory, he had cut me off. He thought that by firing me through HR, he had revoked my access. He relied on standard protocols. He relied on the front door. He forgot about the ghost key. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I typed in the string of characters. It was a line from a poem I loved, mixed with the GPS coordinates of the first building we ever bought and the date Tyler lost his first tooth. Mark didn't know any of those things. Authentication processing. Access granted. Administrator level. The screen flooded with data. The entire nervous system of H&M Real Estate lay open before me. Emails, bank transfers, wire logs, tax documents, private chat histories. I wasn't just looking at a company. I was looking at the crime scene of my marriage. I started downloading. I didn't just want a few files. I wanted everything. Every email Mark had sent in the last 5 years. Every expense report. Every wire transfer to the Cayman Islands or Switzerland. And that's when I saw it. A folder named Project B. It wasn't a building project. B stood for Brenda. I opened the folder and the blood drained from my face. This wasn't just an affair. This was embezzlement on a massive scale. Dates, amounts, receipts. January 12th, $50,000 wire to B, Miller Consulting. Brenda's maiden name. February 14th, $12,000 Cartier. March 1st, $4,500 monthly rent, luxury suite, the Drake Hotel. He had been keeping Brenda like a concubine on the company dime for 3 years. But it went deeper. I saw transfers to a shell company I didn't recognize, Orion Holdings. The signatory on Orion Holdings wasn't Mark. It was Brenda. And the assets being transferred into Orion weren't just cash. They were deeds. Mark was slowly transferring the titles of our most valuable unencumbered properties into a company owned by my sister. He was stripping H&M Real Estate hollow, preparing to leave me with the empty shell while he and Brenda walked away with the assets. I felt sick. This wasn't just about replacing me as a wife. This was grand larceny. This was theft. But as I scrolled through the documents, a cold smile touched my lips. Mark was an actor, not an architect. He didn't understand the paperwork he was signing. In his arrogance and in Brenda's greed, they had made mistakes. Sloppy, amateur mistakes. They had forged my signature on the deed transfers. I could see it on the PDFs, a clumsy digital copy-paste of my signature from a different document. And on the operating agreement for Orion Holdings, Brenda had listed her permanent address. It was my address, the house I paid for. I had them dead to rights. But I couldn't strike yet. If I went to the police now, Mark would claim it was a clerical error, pay a fine, and bury me in litigation for years. He had the expensive lawyers. I had $10. No, I needed to let them hang themselves. I needed them to feel safe. I needed them to think I was defeated, broke, and hiding in a hole. I closed the laptop. I had the blueprints of their destruction. Now I just needed to build the trap. Voice full of cold realization, still some pain, the digital evidence of project be burned in my mind, forcing me to recall exactly how Brenda had infiltrated my sanctuary. It started 5 years ago, a time when H&M Real Estate was booming, and my guard was down. Brenda had just gone through her third divorce. Her ex-husband, a decent mechanic named Dave, had left her because she refused to work and spent his paycheck on designer purses she couldn't afford. She showed up at my doorstep with 2 suitcases and a sob story that would have won an Oscar. He was abusive, Heather, she cried, throwing herself into my arms. I later learned abusive meant he cut up her credit card. I have nowhere to go. Mom said you'd help. Joyce called me 10 minutes later. Heather, you have that big house with all those empty guest rooms. Let your sister stay for a few weeks. She just needs to get back on her feet. Family helps family. I agreed. I always agreed. A few weeks turned into 6 months. Brenda lay by my pool all day, drinking my wine and criticizing my gardening stuff. Mark, at the time, seemed annoyed by her presence. She's lazy, Heather, he'd complain. She treats our house like a hotel. I defended her. She's grieving, Mark. Give her time. Then came the request. I need a job, Brenda announced one night at dinner. I'm bored. I want to work for you guys. I almost choked on my water. Brenda, we run a commercial real estate firm. It's high pressure. What skills do you have for this? I'm good with people, she insisted. I can be. I don't know. Client relations. I can plan the parties. I can talk to the investors. You guys are so stiff. You need someone fun. No, I said. It was one of the few times I set a boundary. But Joyce intervened. She drove 40 minutes to have coffee with me. Heather, this is Brenda's chance to be responsible. If you don't give her a job, she'll spiral. Do you want her living on your couch forever? Give her a salary. Let her move out. Mark thinks it's a good idea. I blinked. Mark does. I spoke to him, Joyce said smoothly. He thinks Brenda could help soften the company image. You know, you can be a bit intense, honey. I confronted Mark. You want to hire Brenda? Mark shrugged, adjusting his tie. Your mom made a good point. We need someone to handle the social stuff, the galas, the charity events. You hate that stuff. Let her do it. Pay her assistant salary. Get her out of the house. It's a win-win. I relented. I created a title, Director of Special Events. At first, it seemed fine. Brenda moved into a condo, which I subsidized, and she planned the company Christmas party. It was lavish, over budget, but successful. Then the subtle shifts began. Brenda started coming into the office every day, dressed not in business attire, but in figure-hugging dresses that were just on the edge of inappropriate. She spent hours in Mark's office discussing event logistics. I would walk by and hear them laughing. Whenever I entered the room, they would stop. What's so funny? I'd ask, feeling a prickle of unease. Just a joke about a client, Brenda would say, smiling that saccharine smile. You wouldn't get it, Heather. It's an inside joke. She started joining us for business lunches. Then she started replacing me at them. Heather, you stay and finish the quarterly projections, Mark would say. Brenda and I will take the developers to the steakhouse. You know you hate small talk. And I did hate small talk. I loved the work, so I let them go. I stayed in the office, eating a salad at my desk, crunching numbers, ensuring our profit margins were healthy, while my husband and my sister drank martinis and laughed at my expense. I noticed changes in Mark. He started dressing younger. He bought a Porsche he didn't need. He started staying out late for networking. When I expressed concern, Joyce gaslit me to oblivion. You're being paranoid, Heather, she scolded. You should be happy Mark and Brenda get along. Most men hate their in-laws. It's a blessing. Don't ruin it with your jealousy. It's unbecoming. Jealousy. She made me feel like a crazy, insecure shrew. Now, looking at the Project B folder on my laptop, I saw the reality. The networking dinners were dates. The business trips to Miami were vacations. And the consulting fees paid to Brenda were actually her allowance for being his mistress. The snake hadn't just slithered into the grass. I had opened the gate, invited her in, and fed her warm milk. And the worst part? My mother had held the gate open. Joyce had brokered this. She had pushed Brenda onto Mark, knowing exactly what Brenda was capable of. She wanted Brenda to have the life I had built. Because in her twisted mind, Brenda deserved the kingdom, and I was just the builder, meant to construct it and move on. I slammed my hand against the cheap motel desk. The pain was grounding. Okay, I whispered to the empty room. You want to play the fun, irresponsible game? Let's see how fun it is when the architect pulls the load-bearing wall. Voice speeds up, becomes focused, strategic, hints of cold satisfaction. I spent the next 6 hours in a trance of forensic accounting. The ghost key gave me access to everything, but I had to be careful. If I made any changes, if I altered any files, the system logs might alert the IT director, a man named Steve, who used to be loyal to me, but was now undoubtedly answering to Mark. So, I became a ghost. I copied. I downloaded. I took screenshots. I traced the money flow. It was worse than I thought. H&M Real Estate was bleeding. To fund their lifestyle and the transfers to Brenda's shell company, Mark had stopped paying the vendors. We were 3 months behind on payments to the construction crews for the new downtown high-rise. We were in default on the interest payments for 2 major loans. Mark was robbing Peter to pay Brenda. The company, my life's work, was a house of cards. If the creditors found out, we would be insolvent in 30 days. But then I found something that made me sit up straight. It was an email chain between Mark and a private investigator named Vance Investigations. The timestamp was from 2 years ago. Subject: Target Surveillance. H. Bryant. Mark, I need dirt. Anything. Infidelity. Substance abuse. Mental instability. I need grounds to avoid the prenup. Vance. Mr. Bryant, we've followed her for 6 months. She goes to work. She goes to the grocery store. She goes to her mother's house. She works late. There is no dirt. The woman is a saint. Mark, look harder. Or make something up. I can't afford to give her half. My breath caught in my throat. 2 years. He had been planning to discard me for 2 years, but he couldn't find a way to do it without losing money. And then a more recent email. Dated 1 week ago. Mark, forget the dirt. We're going with a mental breakdown angle. Her family will testify. Her mother and sister are on board. We'll claim she's overworked, paranoid, unfit to lead. We'll force a vote of no confidence with the board. Once she's out, we trigger the buyout clause at the lowest valuation. Joyce, I can testify that she's been erratic lately. Very emotional. I'm worried about her, Mark. We need to do what's best for the company. I stared at the screen, tears of rage blurring my vision. My mother, my own mother, was co-conspiring to frame me as mentally unstable so her golden child could steal my husband and my money. Erratic? I whispered. I'll show you erratic. I dug deeper. I needed leverage. Evidence of fraud was good, but it would take time to prove in court. I needed something immediate, something that would terrify Mark. I found it in the tax returns. Last year, to secure a massive loan from a private equity firm, Mark had inflated the occupancy rates of our commercial properties. He had falsified tenant leases. He had physically forged signatures of tenants who didn't exist. This wasn't just civil fraud. This was bank fraud. This was federal prison time. And the loan documents? They were signed by Mark Bryant, CEO. My signature wasn't on them. I had been out of town for my aunt's funeral that week, a funeral Brenda missed, and Mark had said he would handle the paperwork. He had signed his own death warrant, and he didn't even know it. I copied the loan documents. I copied the fake leases. I created a dossier that was a nuclear bomb. I checked the clock. It was 2 p.m. I had been working for 12 hours straight. I was hungry, unwashed, and running on adrenaline. I needed a burner phone. I couldn't use my cell. They were probably tracking it or getting the logs. I went to the convenience store across the street, buying a cheap prepaid phone with cash. Back in the room, I sat on the bed and stared at the new phone. Who could I call? My friends? Most of them were couple friends, shared with Mark. They would likely side with the charming Mark or stay neutral. My family? Obviously not. My employees? Too risky. I needed someone powerful, someone who hated Mark, someone who had the resources to fight a war. A name popped into my head. Arthur Sterling. Arthur was a billionaire real estate tycoon in Chicago. Old money ruthless, but principled. 3 years ago, Mark had outbid Arthur for a prime piece of land on the riverfront. Mark had won by bribing a city zoning official to reclassify the land, a move I had fiercely opposed, but Mark had done behind my back. Arthur had suspected foul play. He had publicly called Mark a snake in a cheap suit. Mark had laughed it off, but Arthur had never forgotten. If I went to Arthur Sterling with proof of Mark's fraud, specifically the fraud that screwed Arthur out of that land deal, it was a Hail Mary. Arthur might just laugh at me. He might throw me out. But he was the only person in Chicago with enough power to shield me from Mark's legal team. I dialed the number for Sterling Enterprises. I knew it by heart. I had stared at it enough times when we were rivals. Sterling Enterprises, Executive Office. A crisp voice answered. I need to speak to Mr. Sterling immediately. Mr. Sterling is in meetings. May I ask what this is regarding? Tell him it's Heather Bryant. Tell him I know how Mark Bryant got the riverfront zoning permit, and tell him I have the emails. There was a pause. Hold, please. 30 seconds later, a gruff, deep voice came on the line. Mrs. Bryant, to what do I owe the pleasure? Is your husband sending you to gloat? My husband just fired me, emptied my bank accounts, and moved his mistress into my house, I said, my voice steady. I'm not here to gloat, Mr. Sterling. I'm here to burn him to the ground. And I thought you might want to bring the marshmallows. Silence. Then a low chuckle. I'm listening. Voice softens with deep pain, then hardens with resolve. Before I went to meet Arthur Sterling, there was one more wound I had to cauterize. One file I had been avoiding in the H&M database, the Tyler Trust. Tyler was my soft spot, my Achilles heel. I had shielded him from Mark's narcissism his whole life. When Mark forgot Tyler's birthday, I bought the gift and signed Mark's name. When Mark missed Tyler's soccer games, I told Tyler that Dad was working hard for our future. I had raised him to believe his father was a hero, covering up the reality that his father was a neglectful egoist. I realized now that was my greatest mistake. I had protected Tyler from the truth, and in doing so, I had allowed Mark to buy his loyalty with lies. I opened the trust fund documents. Mark had recently modified the terms. Originally, the trust was set to pay out at age 25, contingent on college graduation. The new terms, dated 2 weeks ago, immediate access to a $200,000 cash disbursement, transfer of title for a 2023 Porsche 911. And the correspondence attached. Tyler, Dad, Mom is going to flip if I drop out next semester. Mark, Mom isn't going to be in charge much longer, Ty. She treats you like a kid. I treat you like a man. You want the car? You want the cash? You just have to back me up when the time comes. You have to tell the lawyers that Mom has been acting crazy, that she's unstable. Tyler, she has been kind of stressed lately. Mark, exactly. She's losing it. We need to protect the company. If you stick with me, I'll make you VP of Acquisitions next year. No degree needed. You can learn on the job like I did. Tyler, VP? Seriously? Okay, I'm in. What do I need to do? I read the words, and my heart didn't just break. It shattered into dust. VP of Acquisitions. Tyler was failing intro to economics. He spent his weekends playing video games and sleeping until noon. He wasn't qualified to run a lemonade stand, let alone a department in a multi-million-dollar firm. Mark was setting him up for failure, stroking his ego to use him as a pawn against me. And Tyler, my sweet boy, he had sold his mother for a Porsche and a title he didn't earn. I remembered the text he sent me last night. Dad says he'll cut off my tuition. He wasn't worried about tuition. He was worried about the easy money. I pulled up Tyler's credit card statement, the one I paid. Liquor store, for $100. Nightclub, $1,200. Bail bondsman, $500. My son was spiraling. And instead of parenting him, Mark was funding the spiral to buy an ally. I picked up my burner phone. I hesitated. This was my son. But the boy who sat on that couch and told me to accept reality wasn't the boy I raised. He was a creation of his father. If I continued to cushion his fall, I would lose him forever to Mark's world of corruption and shallowness. The only way to save him, to truly save him, was to let him crash. I drafted a text. I didn't send it yet. I just wrote it, staring at the cursor. Tyler, I saw the emails. I saw the car. You chose the easy path, but the easy path is a trap. When your father is done using you, he will discard you, just like he did me. I love you enough to let you learn this the hard way. Good luck, Mr. Vice President. I saved the draft. I wiped my eyes. I navigated to the payroll system. I removed Tyler from the intern payroll he had been on for 3 years, despite never coming into the office. I couldn't touch the trust. Mark controlled that now. But I could touch the health insurance. Tyler was on my policy. The policy I paid for personally. Remove dependent, Tyler Bryant. Reason, no longer a full-time student. It was petty. It was small. But it was the first time in 21 years I hadn't fixed something for him. My phone buzzed. It was the address for the meeting with Arthur Sterling. 1 hour. The Union League Club, library room. Come alone. I closed the laptop. I went into the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I tried to fix my hair. My suit was rumpled, but I brushed it off. I put on a layer of lipstick, my armor. I looked in the mirror. The woman staring back looked tired. Yes, but she looked dangerous. She looked like a mother who had lost her cubs and had nothing left to lose. You want unstable, Mark? I said to my reflection. I'll show you tectonic. Voice becomes sharper, more confident, with a hint of menace. I walked into the Union League Club wearing the same rumpled suit I had fled my house in, carrying a laptop bag that contained enough evidence to send my husband to federal prison. The doorman looked at me with skepticism. This place smelled of old money, cigars, and mahogany, a world Arthur Sterling ruled. I found him in the library room, sitting in a leather wingback chair, reading the Financial Times. He was 65, with silver hair and eyes like polished flint. He didn't stand up when I approached. Mrs. Bryant, he said, folding his newspaper. You look terrible. I feel terrible, I admitted, sinking into the chair opposite him. But my brain is working just fine. You mentioned the riverfront deal, Arthur said, cutting to the chase. You said you had proof. I opened my laptop. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I pulled up the dossier I had compiled in the motel room. I turned the screen toward him. 3 years ago, Mark outbid you for the riverfront land. You suspected he bribed the zoning commissioner, Frank Miller. You were right. Arthur leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Here is the wire transfer, I said, pointing to the screen. $50,000 to a shell company called Miller Consulting. And here are the emails between Mark and Miller discussing the expedited rezoning fee. Mark was sloppy. He used his personal email for the initial contact. Arthur scanned the documents. His expression didn't change, but the air around him seemed to grow colder. Why are you showing me this now? You were the CO. You benefited from this deal. I didn't know, I said, my voice steady. Mark kept a shadow ledger. I found it last night after he kicked me out of my house, froze my accounts, and moved my sister into my bed. Arthur looked up, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. Your sister. And my mother is cheering them on, I added, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. It's a regular family reunion, and I'm the only one not invited. I took a breath. Mr. Sterling, I didn't come here to gossip. I came here to make a deal. Mark is trying to destroy me. He's forged my signature on fraudulent loans. He's embezzling company funds. He's going to leave H&M Real Estate a smoking crater. And you want me to save you? Arthur asked, raising an eyebrow. No. I want you to help me bury him. And in exchange, I will give you the riverfront property. Arthur paused. Go on. Mark is overleveraged. He's cash poor. He's about to default on the construction loans. If you step in as a white knight investor now, offering a bridge loan to save the project, he'll take it. He's desperate. And in the loan agreement, we include a collateral clause. If he defaults, which he will, because I know the real numbers, you seize the assets, specifically the riverfront deed. Arthur stared at me for a long moment. The silence stretched, heavy and tense. Then a slow smile spread across his face. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator recognizing another predator. You're vindictive, aren't you? Arthur said softly. I'm efficient, I corrected. Mark thinks I'm a scorned wife who's going to cry in a corner. He doesn't realize I'm the one who wrote his business plan. Arthur closed my laptop and pushed it back toward me. I like you, Heather. You have grit. He paused. Mark always struck me as a peacock. All feathers, no flight. But you're a hawk. He pulled out his phone. I'm going to call my personal counsel. He's the best litigator in Chicago. He'll represent you in the divorce. Pro bono. Consider it an investment in our new partnership. Thank you, I whispered, relief flooding through me. And Heather, Arthur added, his eyes hard. Don't disappoint me. If we do this, we destroy him completely. No mercy. No taking him back when he cries. He won't be crying, I said, thinking of the smirk on Mark's face when he took my ring. He'll be screaming. Arthur nodded. Good. Now, let's get you a hotel room that doesn't charge by the hour. You can't plan a war if you haven't slept. Voice returns to a calmer, reflective tone, but with an underlying steeliness. That night, I slept in a suite at the Four Seasons, paid for by Sterling Enterprises. I took a long bath, scrubbing the motel grime off my skin. As I lay in the crisp, clean sheets, I felt a shift deep inside me. For 20 years, I had been the fixer. I had smoothed over Mark's mistakes, cleaned up his messes, made him look good. I had been the invisible glue holding everything together. Now I was going to be the solvent. I was going to dissolve everything he thought he owned. I picked up my burner phone and texted Arthur one word, ready. 3 days later, the trap was set. Arthur's lawyer, a terrifyingly calm man named David Cohen, had drafted the settlement agreement. It was a masterpiece of legal misdirection. On the surface, it looked like a total surrender. The proposal: 1. Mark keeps the marital home. 2. Mark keeps full ownership of H&M Real Estate. 3. Heather receives a lump sum of $500,000, a fraction of what I was owed. 4. Heather waives all claims to future spousal support. It looked like I was giving up. It looked like I was broken, desperate for cash, and just wanted to run away. Mark would love it. It fed his ego perfectly. But buried deep in the 60-page document, in Section 14, subsection C, paragraph 4, was the poison pill clause. In the event that any party to this agreement is found to have engaged in undisclosed criminal activity, fraud, or embezzlement during the marriage, or is convicted of a felony within 24 months of signing, this entire agreement is void ab initio. In such case, all assets, including 100% of company stock and real property, shall revert to the non-offending party as punitive damages. Mark never read the fine print. He paid lawyers to do that. But his lawyer, Robert Vance, was lazy. I knew that because I used to pay his bills. Vance skimmed contracts. He looked for the big numbers, the payout, the alimony. He wouldn't be looking for a specific reversion clause buried in boilerplate text about liability. I met Mark and his lawyer at Vance's office. I wore no makeup. I wore an old sweater. I kept my head down, looking at the floor. I needed to sell the image of the defeated woman. Mark walked in like he owned the world. He was wearing a new Italian suit, and he smelled of expensive cologne, probably a gift from Brenda. Well, look who crawled out of her hole, Mark sneered as he sat down. I hope you're ready to sign, Heather. Brenda and I have wedding invitations to order. Just give me the check, I said, my voice trembling. I just want to leave, Mark. I can't fight you anymore. Mark laughed, glancing at Vance. See? I told you she'd fold. She doesn't have the stomach for this. Vance slid the papers across the table. Standard agreement, Heather. You walk away with $500,000. Clean break. Just sign here, here, and here. I picked up the pen. My hand shook, partially acting, partially pure adrenaline. What about Tyler? I asked softly. Tyler is staying with me, Mark said, leaning back in his chair. He's my VP now. We're going to build an empire together without your constant nagging. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, but I swallowed it. Okay, take care of him. Just sign the damn papers, Heather. I signed. I put my name on the line that would seemingly strip me of 20 years of hard work. Then Mark signed. He did it with a flourish, a big arrogant loop. Done, Vance said, closing the folder. The check will be wired to your account tomorrow. Mark stood up and buttoned his jacket. He looked down at me with a smirk that made my skin crawl. You know, Heather, you should thank me. You were always too uptight for this life. Go move to a farm or something. Find a nice librarian. Goodbye, Mark, I whispered. As I walked to the elevator, I heard Mark laughing with Vance. That was easier than I thought. She didn't even ask for the beach house. The elevator doors closed, cutting off his laughter. I leaned against the metal wall and let out a long breath. He had signed. The poison pill was active. Now all I had to do was prove the fraud, and I already had the evidence. I just needed the right stage to present it. And what better stage than the wedding? Mark and Brenda had announced their date. It was in 3 weeks. A rush wedding, they called it. They wanted to be legitimized before the spring gala season. 3 weeks? That was my timeline. I walked out of the building and into Arthur's waiting town car. Did he sign? Arthur asked from the back seat. He signed, I said, a genuine smile finally breaking through. He thinks he bought my silence for $500,000. He just signed over his entire life. Arthur handed me a glass of sparkling water. To the architect. To the demolition, I replied. Voice becomes sharper, more focused on the plan, hints of building intensity. The next 3 weeks were a study in masochism. I had to stay invisible while Mark and Brenda paraded their victory all over Chicago. I rented a small, nondescript apartment on the north side, using my maiden name. I spent my days with Arthur's forensic accountants, building the case file. We were turning the raw data I had stolen into a legal sledgehammer. Every night I tortured myself by checking social media. Brenda's Instagram was a vomit of luxury. A photo of a new Mercedes convertible. Hubby-to-be spoils me. #blessed #new beginnings. A photo of my dining room, redecorated with tacky gold wallpaper. Out with the old, in with the glam. Finally making this house a home. That hurt, seeing her erase my touch from the home I built. But the most painful posts came from my mother. Joyce posted a photo of the three of them, Mark, Brenda, and herself, raising champagne flutes at a tasting menu dinner. Caption, finally, a family that knows how to enjoy life. So proud of my beautiful daughter Brenda and my wonderful son-in-law Mark. True love always wins. True love. She had sold her eldest daughter for a seat at a fancy table. And Tyler. Tyler was silent on social media, but I saw the credit card alerts on the secondary accounts I still monitored, the ones Mark hadn't found yet. Liquor World, $400. Club Inferno, $1,200. Bail Bondsman, $500. My son was spiraling. Mark wasn't parenting him, he was enabling him. I wanted to rush in and save him, but Arthur stopped me. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved, Heather, Arthur told me gently. He chose his side. Let him see what that side really looks like when the lights go out. I knew he was right, but it felt like cutting off a limb. Meanwhile, the company was rotting from the inside. My spies, Sarah in accounting, Jim in project management, fed me daily updates. Mark hasn't been in the office past 2 p.m. in weeks, Sarah texted. He's letting Brenda plan the rebranding of the company. She wants to change the logo to pink and gold. Pink and gold, Heather, for a commercial real estate firm. The contractors are threatening to walk off the job at the Highland site, Jim reported. Mark told them the check is in the mail. It's not. He used the construction draw to pay for the wedding venue. Let it burn, I told them. Just document everything. Save every email where he tells you to delay payments. The wedding was going to be at the Palmer House Hilton, the Grand Ballroom. It was the most expensive venue in the city. Brenda had invited 300 guests, investors, politicians, local celebrities. They wanted to cement their status as the new power couple of Chicago. They wanted an audience. Good, I thought, looking at the invitation Sarah had smuggled out for me. They want a show? I'll give them a show. 2 days before the wedding, I received a final piece of leverage. It came from an unexpected source. My phone rang. Unknown number. Hello, Heather. It's Dave. Dave. Brenda's ex-husband, the mechanic she had bled dry. Dave, I said, surprised. How are you? I'm okay. Look, I heard about what happened. What they did to you. It's sick. It is, I agreed. I have something, Dave said, his voice lowering. When Brenda left me, she left a box of papers in the garage. I was going to burn them, but I went through them last night. Heather, she has credit cards in your name from 3 years ago. My blood ran cold. What? She opened them when she was staying with you. She intercepted the mail. She maxed them out and then hid the statements. But I found the letters from the collection agencies. And I found a letter from Mark. From Mark. Yeah, he paid off one of the cards. The letter says, I covered this one, B, but you have to be more careful. If Heather sees this on the credit report, we're both dead. Keep sticking to the plan. 2 more years and we take it all. 2 more years. The timeline matched perfectly. Mark had been conspiring with my sister to steal my identity and my money while I was feeding her and giving her a job. Dave, I said, my voice shaking. Can you bring me that box? I'm on my way, he said. When Dave handed me that box, I felt the final lock click into place. This wasn't just fraud. This was a conspiracy. Predatory, calculated, and evil. I looked at the letter in Mark's handwriting. 2 more years and we take it all. I put the letter in my safe. Thank you, Dave, I said. Give him hell, Heather, he said, a grim smile on his face. Oh, I plan to, I replied. I plan to give them the whole inferno. Voice heavy with maternal pain, but still resolved. The day before the wedding, I did something dangerous. I went to see Tyler. I knew I shouldn't. Arthur advised against it, but I was a mother first and a vengeful ex-wife second. I needed to give him one last chance to step off the sinking ship. I waited outside his new penthouse apartment, the one Mark had bought with company funds. At 11 a.m., Tyler stumbled out, looking hungover. He was wearing designer sunglasses and a hoodie that cost more than my first car. Tyler, I called out. He jumped, spinning around. When he saw me, his face hardened. Mom, what are you doing here? You're stalking me now. I'm not stalking you. I'm trying to save you. I don't need saving, he spat, walking toward his Porsche. I'm doing great. Dad just put me in charge of the South Side portfolio. Tyler, listen to me, I said, stepping in his path. Your father is lying to you. The company is bankrupt. He's stealing money to pay for this lifestyle. He's using you as a shield. When the feds come, and they are coming, your name is on the documents. Tyler laughed. It was a hollow, brittle sound. You're just jealous. You're jealous because Dad is winning and you're nobody. You're living in some dump, right? Dad told me. I'm living in reality, I said, my voice urgent. Tyler, please don't go to the wedding tomorrow. Just call in sick. Go stay with your friends. Just don't be there, standing next to him, when it happens. When what happens, he challenged. You going to crash it? You going to make a scene? God, you're pathetic, Mom. Dad said you'd try to ruin it. He calls me pathetic. I felt the anger rising, but I pushed it down. Tyler, look at me. I raised you. I know you. You're not this person. You're kind. You're smart. You're not a thief. I'm not a thief, he shouted, his face turning red. I'm a businessman like Dad. Dad is a fraud. I shouted back. And Brenda is a parasite. And if you stay with them, you're going down with them. Tyler glared at me. Then he pulled out his phone. I'm calling security. Get away from me. He got in his car and revved the engine aggressively. As he peeled out of the parking lot, he rolled down the window and yelled, Don't come tomorrow, Mom. Nobody wants you there. You're the past. I watched him drive away, my heart breaking all over again. But this time, the break was cleaner. I had tried. I had extended the hand. He had slapped it away. Now he was on his own. I drove back to my apartment. Arthur was waiting for me with the final preparations. How did it go? He asked, though he clearly knew the answer from my face. He's gone, I said flatly. He's fully brainwashed. Then he learns the hard way, Arthur said. Are you ready for tomorrow? Yes. We have the projector access codes. Yes. The police are briefed? Yes. Detective Miller is meeting us in the lobby at 8 p.m. Arthur handed me a garment bag. Then you'll need this. I unzipped the bag. Inside was a dress. It wasn't a frantic, desperate ex-wife dress. It was a sleek, black, tailored tuxedo suit. Yves Saint Laurent. Powerful. Elegant. Severe. Wear your armor, Heather, Arthur said. Tomorrow, you're not the victim. You're the executioner. I touched the fabric. It felt cool and smooth. Thank you, Arthur. Get some rest, he said. Tomorrow is going to be a long night. I didn't rest. I sat by the window, watching the city lights. I thought about Mark and Brenda, probably rehearsing their vows right now. Probably laughing about how they had gotten away with it. 2 more years and we take it all. They wouldn't get 2 years. They wouldn't even get 2 days. Tomorrow, Mr. and Mrs. Bryant were going to have a very different kind of reception. Dramatic shift. Voice becomes cold, controlled, powerful, building to a climax. The morning of the wedding dawned gray and overcast, a perfect Chicago day for a funeral. I spent the morning reviewing the presentation. We had timed it perfectly. It would start right after the love story video montage that Brenda had spent $20,000 producing. At 6 p.m., the guests began to arrive at the Palmer house. I watched the live stream from a camera Arthur had planted in the ballroom. He owned a stake in the hotel. Getting access was trivial. It was nauseating. The room was dripping in crystals and pink roses, thousands of them. There was an ice sculpture of Mark and Brenda intertwined. I saw my mother, Joyce, greeting guests. She was wearing a champagne-colored gown that was far too young for her, beaming like she had won the lottery. Yes, isn't it wonderful? I heard her say to a confused cousin. They're soulmates. Heather, oh, poor Heather just couldn't handle Mark's success. She's taking some time away. I saw Mark. He looked nervous, but triumphant. He was shaking hands, clapping backs, playing the role of the benevolent king. And Brenda, she walked in wearing a custom Vera Wang gown, dripping in diamonds. Diamonds that my company paid for. She looked beautiful, I had to admit. Beautiful and rotten. The ceremony began. I listened to them exchange vows. I promise to be your partner in all things, Mark said, looking deep into Brenda's eyes. I promise to support your dreams and spend my life making you happy, Brenda cooed. I sat in the hotel suite upstairs, sipping a black coffee. Lies, I whispered. Every word is a lie. Are we good to go? Arthur asked, checking his watch. The signal is live, the tech guy confirmed. As soon as you give the word, we hijack the feed. Not yet, I said. Wait for the toasts. Wait until everyone is seated and watching the screens. The reception began. The champagne flowed. Mark stood up to give a speech. I want to thank everyone for being here, he boomed, holding Brenda's hand. This has been a long journey, a journey to find true happiness. Sometimes you have to make hard choices to find your real destiny. The crowd applauded politely, though I saw some uncomfortable glances. Everyone knew the scandal. They just didn't care, as long as the open bar was premium. And to my new wife, Brenda, Mark continued, you are my muse, my rock, my everything. My phone buzzed. It was the cue. Now, I said. Down in the ballroom, the lights dimmed for the video montage. Sentimental music began to play. Photos of Mark and Brenda on yachts in Paris at the beach flashed on the massive screens behind the head table. The crowd awed. I stood up and smoothed my tuxedo jacket. I walked out of the suite and headed for the elevator. Showtime, Arthur said, walking beside me. Inside the elevator, I watched the numbers tick down. 10, 9, 8. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It was beating slow and heavy, like a war drum. The elevator doors opened on the lobby level. Detective Miller and 2 uniformed officers were waiting. Miss Bryant, the detective asked. Yes, we have the warrant. We're ready when you are. Give me 5 minutes, I said. I want them to see it before the handcuffs go on. Understood. I walked toward the ballroom doors. The security guards hired by Mark to keep me out stepped forward. Ma'am, this is a private event. Arthur Sterling stepped out from behind me. And I own the building. Step aside or you'll be looking for work tomorrow. The guards hesitated, recognized Arthur, and immediately stepped back. I pushed open the double doors. Inside, the music had just swelled to a crescendo. The video on the screen showed Mark and Brenda kissing in front of the Eiffel Tower. And then the screen flickered. The music cut out with a screech of feedback. The room went silent. On the massive screens, the romantic image vanished. In its place, a stark white spreadsheet appeared. Red numbers. And then a document. A credit card statement. Name, Brenda Miller. Address, 124 Oak Lane. My house. Purchase, Cartier diamond ring, $25,000, paid by H&M corporate account. A murmur rippled through the crowd. What is that? Brenda shrieked, standing up. Mark, fix it. Cut the feed. Turn it off. Mark yelled at the AV booth. Turn it off. But the tech guy in the booth was ours. He didn't turn it off. He turned up the volume. And then my voice, pre-recorded, boomed over the speakers. Hello, Mark. Hello, Brenda. You wanted a family gathering. You wanted everyone to witness your union. Well, let's show them what this union is really built on. All heads turned, not to the screen, but to the back of the room. I walked in. The silence in the grand ballroom was absolute. 300 people turned in their chairs to look at me. I walked down the center aisle, my heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. The black tuxedo suit made me look like a shadow against the sea of pink flowers. Mark stood frozen at the head table, his face draining of color. Brenda clutched her napkin to her chest, her mouth agape. My mother, Joyce, looked like she was having a stroke. Heather, Mark whispered, the microphone picking up his trembling voice. What are you doing? I didn't stop until I reached the center of the dance floor, directly in front of the head table. I looked up at them, the people who had been my world, now just small, frightened figures on a stage. I'm here to give a toast, I said, my voice projecting clearly without a microphone. I held up a remote control. I clicked it. The screen behind them changed again. This time it was the email chain between Mark and the private investigator. Mark, look harder or make something up. I can't afford to give her half. The crowd gasped. I saw investors, men Mark respected, men he needed leaning in, whispering furiously. Turn it off. Mark screamed, lunging toward the DJ booth. Security, get her out of here. Sit down, Mark. Arthur Sterling's voice boomed from the doorway. Unless you want to add assault to your list of felonies. Mark froze. He saw Arthur. He saw the police officers waiting in the shadows of the exit. This is fake. Brenda yelled, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. She's jealous. She hacked the system. She's crazy. Crazy? I clicked the remote again. A new document appeared, the forged loan application for the Riverfront project. The one with my signature clumsily pasted over the line. Is forgery crazy, Brenda? I asked calmly. Is bank fraud crazy? Because that's federal prison time. And guess whose name is on the shell companies receiving the stolen funds? I clicked again. Orion Holdings. Owner, Brenda Miller. You. I pointed at my sister. You aren't just a mistress. You're a mule. Mark used you to launder $3 million. Did he tell you that? Did he tell you that when the IRS comes looking, they're coming for your signature? Brenda looked at Mark, her eyes wide with horror. Mark. You said it was tax optimization. You said it was legal. Shut up, Brenda. Mark hissed. Oh, don't stop him, I said, smiling coldly. Let him explain. Let him explain to our mother how he refers to her. Click. The email appeared. Subject. The old bat. Mark, just write Joyce another check from the slush fund. The old bat is greedy. As long as we pay for her condo, she'll keep Heather in the dark. She'd sell her own daughter for a renovation budget. Joyce let out a sound that was half wail, half choked sob. She stood up, her hands shaking so hard she knocked over her champagne glass. Mark, she croaked. You called me that? After everything I did for you? I sided with you. I betrayed my own child for you. And look what it got you, Mom, I said, looking at her with pity. A seat at a wedding that's about to become a crime scene. Mark looked around the room, his eyes wild. He saw his empire crumbling in real time. He saw the investors walking out. He saw the waiters stopping to watch. He saw the end. You signed the settlement, he shouted at me, desperate. You signed it. You waived everything. You can't touch the company. Section 14, I said simply. The poison pill. If you committed a crime, the deal is void and everything, the house, the company, the assets, reverts to me. Mark's knees gave out. He slumped back into his chair. And Tyler, I said, turning my gaze to my son, who was sitting at the end of the table, pale as a ghost. Tyler looked at me, terrified. He looked at the screen where his own text messages were now displayed. Tyler, VP? Okay, I'm in. You wanted to be a businessman, Tyler? I said softly. Well, here's your first lesson. Check the partners. I clicked the remote one last time. A video played. It was surveillance footage from the company parking lot. It showed Mark arguing with Brenda 2 days ago. Mark on video. Once we get the money from Sterling, we dump the kid. Tyler is a liability. We leave him with the tax debt and move to Monaco. He's too stupid to notice. The ballroom went dead silent. Tyler stood up slowly. He looked at his father. The hero worship in his eyes was gone, replaced by a shattering realization. Dad, Tyler whispered. You were going to leave me? Mark stammered. Ty, no, I was just stressed. It's out of context. You called me stupid, Tyler said, his voice cracking. You said I was a liability. Tyler, sit down, Mark ordered, trying to regain control. Don't listen to her. Tyler didn't sit down. He picked up his glass of champagne and threw it in Mark's face. I hate you, Tyler screamed. I hate you. Chaos erupted. Joyce was sobbing. Brenda was hyperventilating. Mark was wiping champagne off his face, looking like a drowned rat. I lowered the remote. The presentation was over. I nodded to Detective Miller. The police marched into the room. The guests parted like the Red Sea. Mark Bryant, the detective announced. You are under arrest for bank fraud, embezzlement, and forgery. Brenda Miller, he continued. You are under arrest for conspiracy and money laundering. No, Brenda shrieked as the officer grabbed her wrists. I didn't know. I'm just the girlfriend. He made me do it. Tell it to the judge, the officer said, snapping the handcuffs on. Mark didn't scream. He just stared at me. As they cuffed him, he looked me in the eye. You ruined everything, he spat. You bitter, vindictive bitch. I walked up to him. I stood so close I could smell the fear on him. I didn't ruin anything, Mark, I said, calm as a frozen lake. I just turned on the lights. And you? You're just a cockroach who got caught. They dragged him away. The wedding guests were stunned into silence. The only sound was Joyce's weeping. I looked at the head table one last time. The cake was uncut. The flowers were perfect. The illusion was destroyed. I turned to Arthur Sterling. I think I'm done here. Brilliant, Arthur said, offering me his arm. Absolutely brilliant. As we walked out, I didn't look back at my crying mother or my devastated son. Not yet. They had made their bed. Tonight, they had to sleep in it. Voice transitions to reflective, calm, but empowered. The days following the wedding were a media circus. The Chicago Tribune ran the story on the front page. Wedding bell blues. Real estate tycoon arrested at altar. I didn't give interviews. I let the evidence speak for itself. I moved back into my house 3 days later. The police had cleared it as a crime scene. It was strange walking back into the rooms I had designed. Brenda's things were everywhere. Tacky clothes, cheap magazines, half-empty wine bottles. I hired a cleaning crew. Throw it all out, I told them. Everything that isn't mine. Burn the sheets. Replace the mattresses. I wanted to scrub their DNA from my life. Mark was denied bail. The judge deemed him a flight risk because of the Monaco plan caught on tape. He was sitting in Cook County Jail, trading his Italian suits for an orange jumpsuit. Brenda made bail, paid for by my mother, who had liquidated her retirement savings to get her baby out. But Brenda wasn't free. She was facing 5 to 10 years. Her face was plastered all over the internet as the gold digger groomed for prison. I went into the H&M offices, now solely mine. The employees greeted me with a mix of fear and relief. We're renaming the company, I announced at the first all-hands meeting. H&M is dead. Welcome to Phoenix Holdings. They applauded. They knew who signed the paychecks. A week later, my mother came to see me. She looked 10 years older. Her hair was unkempt, her eyes red. She stood on my porch, shivering. Heather, she said, her voice trembling. Joyce, I said, blocking the door. I didn't call her mom. Can I come in? It's freezing. You can say what you need to say from there. She flinched. Heather, please be reasonable. Brenda, she's terrified. She's just a girl. She didn't know what she was doing. Mark manipulated her. Brenda is 40 years old, I said coldly. She knew she was sleeping with my husband. She knew she was spending my money. She signed the papers. She's your sister. Joyce wailed. You can't let her go to prison. You have to drop the charges. Tell the DA it was a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a crime. If you do this, Joyce hissed, her sorrow turning to familiar venom, you are no daughter of mine. You are destroying this family. I laughed. It was a light, free sound. Joyce, you destroyed this family 20 years ago when you decided Brenda was the princess and I was the servant. You didn't come here to apologize. You came here to ask me to fix it again. You want me to be the scapegoat one last time, so Brenda can walk free. She's delicate. She's a criminal. And you? You are an accomplice. I saw the checks Mark wrote you. Consulting fees. You took money to help them gaslight me. Joyce went pale. I'm not pressing charges against you, Joyce, I said. Not because I love you, but because I don't want the embarrassment of seeing my mother in a mugshot. But you are dead to me. Do not call me. Do not come here. If you need money, ask Brenda. Oh wait. She's broke. I slammed the door in her face. I watched on the security camera as she stood there, banging on the door, screaming my name. Then she slumped, shoulders shaking, and walked away. It hurt. Of course, it hurt. But it was the pain of pulling out a splinter. Sharp, then relief. Then there was Tyler. He hadn't called. He hadn't come by. I knew he was crashing on a friend's couch because the authorities had seized the penthouse and the Porsche. I waited. I knew he had to come to me on his own terms. 2 weeks later, he showed up at my office. He looked terrible. He had lost weight. He was wearing old jeans and a t-shirt. No sunglasses. No attitude. Mom, he asked from the doorway. I looked up from my desk. Hello, Tyler. He walked in and sat in the chair opposite me. He looked at his hands. I'm sorry, he whispered. I know, I said. I was stupid. He made me feel important. He told me I was better than school. He told me you were holding me back. And you believed him because it was easier than working, I said gently but firmly. Yeah, he admitted, tears dripping onto his jeans. I saw the video. He called me a liability. He was going to leave me. He was. I have nothing, Mom. They took the car. I have no money. I need help. I looked at my son. I wanted to hug him. I wanted to write him a check and fix everything. But I was the architect now. And you don't build a strong structure on a cracked foundation. I love you, Tyler, I said. But I'm not going to give you money. He looked up, panicked. But where will I live? I don't know. That's for you to figure out. Mom, please. Here is the deal, I said, sliding a piece of paper across the desk. This is an application for a student loan. And this is a job application for the mailroom at Phoenix Holdings. Minimum wage. You start at the bottom. You finish your degree at night. The mailroom, he asked, shocked. Take it or leave it. If you want to be a man, Tyler, you earn it. Mark gave you things to buy you. I'm offering you nothing so you can build yourself. He stared at the papers. He stared at me. He saw the resolve in my eyes. Slowly, he reached out and took the pen. Okay, he said, his voice shaking. I'll take the job. Good, I said. Report to Sarah in HR. She'll get you a badge. Don't be late. He stood up. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in years. You're really scary, Mom, he said, a hint of admiration in his voice. I know, I smiled. Now get to work. The trial was short. The evidence was overwhelming. Mark Bryant pleaded guilty to avoid a 20-year sentence. He got 8 years in federal prison plus restitution. He looked gray and defeated in the courtroom. He didn't look at me once. Brenda took a plea deal, 3 years in prison for fraud. She sobbed when the gavel came down. She looked at Joyce in the gallery, screaming, Mom, do something. But Joyce could do nothing. Joyce was living in a studio apartment, living off Social Security, having lost her allowance and her pride. I sat in the back row, wearing my black suit. I watched justice be served. I didn't feel joy. I felt peace. The balance sheet was finally corrected. Epilogue, softer, triumphant, reflective, epilogue. 1 year later, I stood in my office on the 40th floor, overlooking the Chicago River. The Phoenix Holdings sign on the wall behind me was sleek, silver, and blue. No pink anywhere. The company was thriving. We had just closed the riverfront deal with Arthur Sterling. It was going to be a mixed-use development, luxury condos, but also affordable housing and a community center. My phone buzzed. Tyler. Hey, Mom. Just finished my econ final. Think I aced it. Also, the mailroom team improved sorting efficiency by 15% this week. Do I get a raise? I smiled. Don't push it, but dinner is on me tonight. 7 p.m. Tyler, see you there. He was working hard. He was tired, broke, and humble. And I had never been prouder of him. He was becoming the man I knew he could be, not the caricature his father tried to mold. There was a knock on my door. Come in. Arthur Sterling walked in, holding a bottle of champagne. To the 1-year anniversary, he said. Of the day you burned down the circus. It seems like a lifetime ago, I said, taking the glass. You know, Arthur said, leaning against my desk. Mark sent me a letter from prison. He wants to know if I'll buy his shares of the old shell companies. He needs money for the commissary. What did you tell him? I told him, I only do business with the CEO, and the CEO is busy building an empire. We clinked glasses. I looked out at the skyline. I had lost a husband. I had lost a sister. I had lost a mother. But I had found myself. I wasn't the scapegoat anymore. I wasn't the fixer. I wasn't the invisible wife. I was Heather Bryant, the architect. And my life? It was finally, truly mine. Call to action. Thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to relive, but if my journey can help even one person stand up to the toxic people in their life, then it was worth it. Family isn't always blood. Family are the people who respect you, who value you, and who stand by you when the storm hits. If you're holding on to someone just because they are family, but they are hurting you, let go. You are strong enough to build something new. Have you ever had to cut ties with someone you loved for your own peace? What would you have done in my shoes that night? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know. And if you enjoyed this story and want to see more justice served, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow.